If you sat a modern home cook down in front of a stove from 1948, they'd recognize the burners and the oven door. Almost nothing else. That dial that isn't a burner control at all, but a thermostat wired to sense the temperature of the pan sitting on top of it. That deep, narrow well sunk into the countertop, built to cook a pot roast on gas that gets switched off 20 minutes in. That drawer under the broiler that isn't for storing baking sheets. It's a warming compartment with its own heat source. Some ranges could time an entire dinner and shut themselves off while the house was empty. Not every stove had these features, but the ones that did were built less like appliances and more like small, purpose-built machines. Here's what got left behind. Don't forget the subscribe. The deep well that wasn't really an oven. On many electric ranges from the 1940s and 50s, one of the surface burners wasn't a burner at all. It was a deep, cylindrical well set into the countertop, deep enough to hold a tall pot with its lid nearly flush to the surface. Brands like Frigidaire and Hotpoint offered these as an alternative cooking zone built for exactly one problem: slow, moist dishes like stews, beans, and pot roasts that didn't need the whole oven fired up to cook. Electricity was expensive through the 1950s and into the 60s, often adding real money to a monthly bill, so a smaller, more contained heating zone made economic sense. The well itself usually wasn't heavily insulated. It relied mainly on its narrow shape to hold heat rather than special lining. Some later Hotpoint models even added a thermostatically controlled well burner and a fitted aluminum pan, turning it into something close to a built-in slow cooker. It wasn't dramatic technology. It solved a specific, everyday problem with a remarkably focused design. But as kitchen layouts, appliance technology, energy economics, and cooking habits changed, dedicating a large section of the cooktop to a single deep well gradually made less sense. The Chambers Thermowell, boiling eggs on a minute of gas. Chambers Corporation, based in Shelbyville, Indiana, built something more elaborate than a simple deep well, the Thermowell. It was a heavily insulated well cooker, engineered so that a short burst of gas heat could be trapped and held for a long stretch afterward. Chambers promoted a genuinely strange-sounding routine. Use a short burst of gas, then let retained heat finish the cooking with the flame off. Its official idle hour cookbook gave precise instructions for everything from eggs to roasts, turning stored heat into a deliberate cooking method rather than a novelty. This wasn't marketing exaggeration layered over an ordinary stove. It was a specific insulation and damper system, patented by the company, built around one idea: that a well-sealed compartment could keep cooking long after the fuel was gone. An entire oven that cooked with the gas turned off. Chambers didn't stop at one well cooker. The company built its entire fireless range concept around the same principle, starting with a design patented by founder John Chambers around 1910. The full-size oven cavity was packed on every side with thick rock wool insulation, letting heat build up quickly once the gas was lit. After a short preheating period, the gas was shut off and a set of internal dampers swung closed, helping the heavily insulated oven retain heat far more effectively as the food continued cooking. The food kept cooking on stored heat for a long time afterward. Chambers literature claimed this also reduced shrinkage and preserved more of a roast's natural moisture, since the food wasn't being blasted with continuous direct heat. The company manufactured versions of this system from 1912 all the way into the 1970s, refining it but never really abandoning the core idea. It's a genuinely unusual way to think about an oven, less like a box that stays hot because you keep feeding it fuel, and more like a thermos built for a Sunday roast. 4. Daisy burners and a griddle built into the top. Chambers ranges were also known for a distinctive burner arrangement nicknamed the Daisy burner: 4 gas jets arranged in a ring, designed to spread heat evenly across a wide pan rather than concentrating it in one hotspot. Chambers wasn't alone in building integrated griddles into the cooktop itself. Several manufacturers, including Roper and Kenmore, offered models with a flat griddle plate set flush into the burner deck, letting a household cook pancakes, bacon, or eggs directly on the range top instead of pulling out a separate pan. On some Chambers models, the griddle and broiler shared the same mechanism, described in company materials as an in-a-top broiler, with a removable grease catch and crumb tray that could be pulled out and washed in the sink. The idea was straightforward. A big Sunday breakfast for a large family didn't need a separate appliance if the range itself could handle it. A burner with its own brain. Thermostatically controlled cooking. By the mid-1950s, some electric ranges from General Electric and Hotpoint offered something closer to a thermostat than a simple power dial on at least one burner. A sensing button sat at the center of the coil, in direct contact with the bottom of the pan, and it regulated the burner's power to hold a chosen temperature rather than just cycling on a fixed high, medium, or low setting. Hotpoint marketed its version as the Supermatic unit, sometimes paired with the deep well burner for slow-cooked dishes, and even sold a matching heavy aluminum frying pan sized to sit correctly on the sensor. The appeal was consistency, frying at a genuinely steady temperature instead of watching a burner overshoot and cool by turns. It's worth noting, this wasn't universal. Most burners on most ranges of the era were still simple resistance dials without any sensing at all. The thermostatically controlled burner was typically a single premium feature on an otherwise ordinary cooktop, not a standard across the whole surface. The oven finally learns to read a thermometer. By the post-war era, the remarkable change wasn't simply that ovens could hold a more consistent temperature. It was that some ranges could begin taking over parts of the cooking schedule itself. Automatic oven controls and timers increasingly allowed cooks to set when cooking began, how long it continued, or when the oven shut itself off. Automatic pilot ignition arrived alongside these features, removing the need to light burners by hand with a match. None of this sounds remarkable now, because it became the baseline for every range that followed. At the time, though, it represented the shift from a stove you constantly managed to one that could, within limits, manage a portion of the cooking on its own. A thermometer, built into the oven itself. Earlier meat thermometers still had to be checked by the cook. What some later ranges added was different. A probe wired directly into the oven itself, plugging into a dedicated outlet inside the cavity, so the oven's own controls could read the internal temperature of the meat continuously and shut off or hold temperature automatically once the target was reached. General Electric built this into later ovens as part of its self-cleaning P7 system, among other models, letting a cook set a target internal temperature rather than a cooking time and walk away with real confidence the roast wouldn't overcook. It measured what actually mattered, the meat itself, not just the surrounding oven air, allowing the range to respond to the food rather than relying on cooking time alone. The drawer that wasn't for baking sheets. Look underneath almost any classic American range and you'll find a drawer at the bottom. On plenty of modern stoves, that space is just for storing sheet pans. On many vintage ranges, it was something else entirely. A genuine warming compartment, sometimes with its own low-level heat source, built to keep rolls, vegetables, or a finished dish at serving temperature while the rest of dinner finished cooking above. Some manufacturers built dedicated warming ovens as a separate compartment entirely. Full-size ranges with double ovens sometimes included a distinct warming closet alongside the main baking oven. Tappan took a related idea in a different direction with what it called a crisp chest, a compartment designed to keep dry goods like crackers and cereal from going soft in a humid kitchen. The underlying problem all of these solved was the same one every host still faces: coordinating multiple dishes that finish cooking at different times, so nothing goes cold while something else catches up. Rotisseries, grill elevators, and indoor barbecue. Some of the more elaborate ranges of the 1950s pushed well past baking and frying into something closer to indoor barbecue. Certain models, including some from Kenmore, included a built-in rotisserie spit inside the range itself, letting a household roast a chicken or a roast on a turning skewer without a separate appliance. Other ranges offered what was sometimes nicknamed a grillevator, a mechanism that physically lowered food closer to the heat source, mimicking the effect of an outdoor charcoal grill from inside the kitchen. Some higher-end models even added small built-in accessories, reinforcing the idea of the range as a complete cooking station rather than simply a heat source. These features tended to show up on larger, pricier ranges aimed at families who entertained often or cooked substantial meals regularly. They were never standard equipment across the market, and they added real mechanical complexity to a machine that already had a lot of moving parts. When the whole range tried to disappear. Not every unusual idea in vintage range design was about cooking mechanics. Some were about reimagining the shape of the appliance entirely. Frigidaire's Flair line, sold through the 1960s, replaced the standard oven door with a glass panel that lifted straight up rather than swinging down, and paired it with a cooktop that pulled outward on a sliding drawer instead of sitting fixed on top. The whole range had a lower, sleeker profile than a conventional stove, built for the increasingly open, design-conscious kitchens of the era. It photographed beautifully in period advertising and represented real engineering ambition. But a pull-out cooktop and a lift-up glass door added mechanical points that could wear, stick, or need adjustment in ways a simple hinged door never would. Distinctive, ambitious designs like the Flair tend to become the ones collectors chase hardest today. Not because they were the most practical stoves ever built, but because nothing since has looked quite like them. Why so much of this went away? Most of these ideas didn't disappear simply because they failed to work. Instead, specialized features increasingly had to justify their added cost, complexity, maintenance, and the space they occupied. Even efficiency-minded designs came with trade-offs. Some chambers ranges, for example, relied on multiple continuously burning pilot lights, complicating the fuel-saving story behind retained heat cooking. Thermostatically controlled burners, automatic probes, and rotisserie mechanisms all meant more parts that could fail, more specialized repairs, and higher manufacturing costs on ranges that were already expensive. As appliance technology standardized and safety expectations increased, manufacturers increasingly favored consistency, easier cleaning, simpler servicing, and lower manufacturing costs over specialized mechanical features. A range built from standardized systems was simply easier to produce and maintain than one filled with one-off mechanisms. None of this means vintage stoves were simply better. Retained heat cooking required different habits than a modern thermostatically controlled oven. Many conventional deep well units lacked the heavy insulation of specialized systems like the chamber's Thermowell, and ranges packed with pilot lights and specialized mechanical systems could demand more maintenance than simpler standardized designs. What changed wasn't a decline, it was a shift in priorities, from machines built to do many specific jobs well toward appliances built to do the essential jobs reliably, safely, and cheaply for millions of households at once. So maybe the real question isn't whether the old stoves were better. It's whether, in trading away all that specialized machinery for consistency, something genuinely useful got left behind along with it.